If you have ever sat down at the end of a long week, looked at your bank account, and felt that specific, quiet devastation, not rage, not sadness exactly, but a low, dry, late afternoon kind of defeat, the kind that settles into the bones like cold air through a cracked window, and wondered why, after all those hours, after all that effort, after everything you gave, the number is still wrong. Then what Napoleon Hill discovered over a century ago is meant for you, and it is meant for you right now. Because here's what nobody in your life has been honest enough to say out loud: working harder is not the answer. Working harder has never been the answer. And if you leave this video before it ends, you will walk back into the same routine tomorrow, and the day after, and the year after, spending the only irreplaceable currency you possess, which is time, buying a life that was never yours to begin with. There is a law, an actual documented, observable law that governs the accumulation of wealth, and it has nothing to do with the number of hours your body performs labor. Napoleon Hill spent over 20 years studying the wealthiest human beings who had ever lived on American soil. He sat across from Andrew Carnegie. He studied Henry Ford. He analyzed the psychology of John D. Rockefeller. And what he found was not what your father told you. It was not what your school taught you. It was not what your employer wants you to believe. What he found was something so counterintuitive, so structurally opposite to everything the working class has been conditioned to accept, that most people, when they first hear it, reject it immediately, because rejecting it is easier than accepting that they have been building on a cracked foundation for their entire adult life. There is a word for the mechanism at the center of all of this. A precise, specific term for the thing that separates the man who dies wealthy from the man who dies exhausted. And Hill identified it with surgical clarity. I will get to it. But first, you need to understand what is actually happening to you and why the architecture of your financial life looks the way it looks right now. Picture a man named Arthur, not a famous man. Not a man anyone wrote a book about. Arthur woke up every morning at 5:45, laced up worn leather work boots with a fraying left eyelet, and drove 43 minutes to a manufacturing plant where he spent 9 hours performing tasks that required his hands and his back and almost none of his mind. He did this for 31 years. He did not miss days. He did not complain in the ways that get people fired. He received 7 raises in 3 decades, each one smaller than the inflation that swallowed it. He told his children that hard work was the answer. He told his wife that security was the goal. He told himself, in those brief, dangerous moments of honesty that arrived just before sleep, that next year would be different. Arthur was not lazy. Arthur was not stupid. Arthur was the victim of a lie so widely distributed, so culturally reinforced, so embedded into the wallpaper of ordinary life, that questioning it felt like heresy. The lie is this: that the exchange of time and physical energy for money is the path to financial freedom. It is not. It has never been. And Napoleon Hill knew why. Now, before we go deeper into the architecture of what Hill actually discovered, and before we get to the specific mechanism that you're going to be able to use starting today, Napoleon Hill wants you to do something. He wants you to look around the channel you're watching right now and ask yourself whether the people here are the kind of people who are serious about transforming their financial reality. If the answer is yes, and if you believe that the mind properly directed is the most powerful wealth-generating instrument ever created, then the single most intelligent thing you can do right now in this moment is click subscribe, because every week this channel delivers the principles Hill spent a lifetime uncovering. And the people who absorb these ideas consistently are not the same people 12 months later. Leave a comment below this video, write the words "I am ready," not because it is a ritual, because the act of declaring your intention in writing is the first movement of the subconscious mind toward the thing it has been waiting to build. Hill understood that declaration is not theater. Declaration is architecture. It is the first brick. Now back to the room where the real conversation happens. The reason Arthur and millions of people exactly like Arthur never escape the financial room they were born into is not because of a lack of effort. It is because effort directed at the wrong target compounds the problem instead of solving it. Every hour Arthur gave to that plant was an hour his mind was not engaged in the only activity that produces real wealth, the formation and execution of a definite chief aim, powered by a burning desire, organized through specialized knowledge and delivered through a structure that generates value independent of his physical presence. Hard work is a room with no windows. You can furnish it beautifully. You can work the floors until they shine. But there is no door that leads to abundance from inside that room, because the room itself was designed to keep you productive for someone else's vision. This is not cynicism. This is architecture. And Napoleon Hill was, above all else, an architect of minds. He understood something about the human psyche that the wealthy have always known and the poor have always been denied. The subconscious mind does not distinguish between a thought that is true and a thought that is repeatedly, emotionally, vividly impressed upon it. It accepts both with equal sincerity. It acts on both with equal commitment. The only difference between the man whose subconscious is building wealth and the man whose subconscious is reinforcing scarcity is the quality and consistency of the mental impressions being fed into it day after day, year after year, decade after decade. And here is where the tragedy becomes almost unbearable to look at directly. Most people are not neutral about money. They are actively, repetitively, emotionally programming themselves for its absence. Every time a person says, "I cannot afford that," the subconscious records it as instruction. Every time a person tells themselves that rich people are lucky or corrupt or different in some fundamental biological way, the subconscious builds another wall in the architecture of lack. Every time a person allows fear, and Hill was specific about the nature of this fear, to be the dominant emotional current in their financial thinking, the subconscious does exactly what it was designed to do. It manifests through behavior, through decision, through unconscious avoidance, the precise reality it has been told to expect. You're not poor because the world is unfair, though the world often is. You're not struggling because opportunity does not exist, though opportunity is rarely handed to anyone without a fight. You're exactly where your dominant thoughts, your emotionally charged, repetitively reinforced, subconsciously embedded dominant thoughts, have systematically brought you. That is not a condemnation. That is a diagnosis. And diagnoses can be treated. But here is the part that should stop you cold, the part that should make you sit up straighter in whatever chair or corner of the room you currently occupy. The consequences of refusing this diagnosis do not stay inside you. They radiate outward. They travel forward in time. They land on the people who had no part in choosing them. Think about your children, not abstractly. Think about a specific child in your life, a specific face, a specific pair of hands. That child is not just watching what you do. That child is downloading what you believe. The architecture of their financial psychology is being constructed right now in real time, using the blueprints that you're living inside of. When they see you exhausted and resentful at the end of every week, working hard and arriving nowhere, the lesson they absorb is not work hard and you will succeed. The lesson they absorb at the cellular level in the part of the brain that does not have language yet is that this is what life is, that effort leads to survival, but not to freedom. That money is a source of stress, not a tool of power, that the ceiling they can see from where you're standing is the ceiling that was built for people like them. Napoleon Hill called this inherited poverty consciousness, and it is one of the most insidious forces he ever documented. Because it does not feel like a choice, it feels like reality. It feels like the nature of things. It feels like the texture of the walls in every room you have ever lived in, so familiar that you stopped noticing them years ago. But they are not reality. They are a construction, and constructions can be demolished, and new ones can be built in their place. The question is whether you are willing to pick up the tools before time makes the decision for you. Because time is the one resource that Hill, in all his decades of studying wealth and its creation, never found a way to manufacture more of. Andrew Carnegie could not buy more of it. Henry Ford, with all his assembly lines and all his ingenuity, could not reverse its direction. The billionaires of Hill's era, men who commanded resources that would dwarf the economies of modern nations, could not stop its consumption. Every day you spend inside the room of hard work without windows is a day that is permanently subtracted from the total. Every year, you wait for circumstances to improve before you begin the mental work of transformation is a year that joins every other year inside an account that cannot be replenished. And the cruelest part of it, the part that keeps Napoleon Hill's work as urgently relevant today as it was when he first published it, is that most people do not realize the account has been draining until it is almost empty. They wake up at 53 or 61 or in the middle of a sleepless night at 47 with the sudden stomach-dropping recognition that the life they were planning to build is now the life they were planning to build And the distinction between those two things is the difference between a blueprint and a grave. Do not let that be your story, because there is another story. There has always been another story. Hill found it embedded in the lives of every person who ever crossed the line between financial struggle and financial freedom, and it followed the same invisible structure every single time. Let me tell you about a man Hill himself referenced in his research, a man who had worked in the steel industry for years with nothing to show for it but a body that was aging faster than his ambitions. This man was not exceptional in any way that the world would have recognized from the outside. He had no extraordinary education. He had no inherited advantage. He had no connections that gave him a shortcut to the rooms where decisions about money were made. What he had was a single, specific, burning idea and the disciplined practice of holding that idea in his mind with such emotional intensity, such vivid, detailed, daily repetition, that his subconscious mind eventually had no choice but to organize his behavior, his perceptions, his conversations, and his decisions around its fulfillment. Within 4 years, that man had built something that generated income while he slept. Within 7, he had crossed a threshold that all his years of labor had never brought him within sight of. The difference was not effort. He had always had effort. The difference was the specific internal process he had learned to apply. The process that Hill spent 20 years distilling into a teachable, repeatable framework. And yes, there is a word for the central mechanism of that process. Hill named it, he defined it with precision, and I will give you that word, that exact term, before this conversation ends. But first, you need to understand the 3 foundational errors that keep intelligent, hard-working people locked inside the room with no windows, because without understanding the errors, the solutions are just interesting ideas that do not change behavior. The first error is the confusion of motion with direction. Hard work is motion. Motion is not the same as direction. A man can run at full speed toward the wrong destination and arrive exhausted at a place he never wanted to be. This is the life of the majority. Not because they did not run, because they never stopped long enough to determine where running was actually taking them. Hill was relentless on this point. The absence of a definite chief aim is not neutrality. It is surrender. The person without a specific, written, emotionally charged financial goal is not floating in open water waiting for a current to carry them somewhere good. They are being carried, already, by the currents of other people's goals, other people's systems, other people's definitions of what their labor is worth. Your employer has a definite chief aim. Your bank has a definite chief aim. Every corporation that has ever extracted value from your time has a definite chief aim, and that aim, by structural necessity, includes the minimization of what they return to you in exchange for the maximization of what they receive from you. This is not malice. It is simply the logical behavior of an organized mind in the presence of an unorganized one. The second error is the belief that specialized knowledge and general education are the same thing. They are not even in the same building. Hill made a distinction that disturbed and liberated people in equal measure when they first encountered it. Formal education teaches you to know things. Specialized knowledge teaches you to do specific, high-value things that the market will pay for at a premium. The most educated person in the room is not necessarily the most valuable person in the room. The person who can translate a specific knowledge into a result that other people desperately need and cannot easily replicate, that person commands a different conversation about compensation entirely. Hill pointed to Ford as the supreme example. Ford was famously undereducated by academic standards. He freely admitted that he did not personally possess the knowledge required to run his empire. What he possessed was something far more powerful, the understanding that his job was not to know everything, but to know who knew what he needed, and to organize those people into a collective intelligence that no individual brain could match. Ford built a room, a very particular kind of room. Not a room with no windows, a room with many doors, each one leading to a specific form of intelligence he could call upon at will. Hill named that room something specific. He had a word for it, and that word is coming. The third error is the most psychologically deep, and it is the hardest to see, because it is the error that looks most like virtue. It is the belief that sacrifice is the price of success. Not preparation, not discipline, not focused strategic effort. Sacrifice, the belief that suffering is evidence of seriousness. That the more you deprive yourself, the more deserving you become. That poverty of experience, poverty of joy, poverty of rest, poverty of vision is somehow the moral prerequisite for abundance. This belief is a trap built with the materials of genuine virtue, and it destroys people who are fundamentally good. Because what it actually does, at the neurological level, at the level of the subconscious architecture, Hill spent his career mapping is associate wealth with pain. And the subconscious mind, which is not a moral philosopher, but a pattern recognition machine, will avoid what it associates with pain with the same reliable consistency that it pursues what it associates with pleasure. The person who believes that becoming rich requires an unbearable degree of suffering will find, with remarkable consistency, that the threshold of suffering required always sits just slightly beyond what they are willing to endure. Not because they are weak, because their subconscious is protecting them from the pain it has been told wealth demands. This is why Hill was so insistent that desire, not obligation, not duty, not fear, but genuine, specific, emotionally charged desire, had to be the engine of the whole enterprise. The mind moves toward what it genuinely wants. It moves away from what it fears or resents. And if your relationship with wealth is primarily constructed from fear and resentment, you're trying to navigate toward a destination while leaning backward. Now, here's the point in the conversation where most people begin to feel something shift, because the errors are visible now. The architecture of the problem is laid out on the table, and you can see the specific places where the structure is compromised. And what Hill always said, what he repeated in every room he ever spoke in every page he ever wrote, was this: once you can see the structure of a problem with precision, you are already closer to its solution. 95% of the people who share that problem, because 95% of the people who share that problem have never stopped moving long enough to look at it clearly. You have stopped. You're looking at it. Now let us build something different. The first principle Hill extracted from his 20 years of research, the one he called the starting point of all achievement, is this: you must form a burning desire for a specific financial outcome, not a vague wish, not a general preference for having more, a burning desire, a specific number, a specific timeline, a specific reason that is emotionally charged enough to make your subconscious take it seriously. Hill was almost aggressive about the specificity requirement. He had seen too many times what happened to general wishes. They dissolved in the first contact with resistance. They evaporated in the face of inconvenience. They were pleasant to hold in the mind on a comfortable afternoon and completely invisible when the morning arrived cold and demanding. But a burning desire for a specific outcome, with a specific reason attached to it that genuinely matters to you at the level of your children's faces, your partner's exhaustion, your own private terror of arriving at the end of your life with your potential still sealed inside you. That kind of desire does not dissolve. It metabolizes difficulty. It converts obstacles into fuel. It finds, with an almost eerie consistency, the pathways that the uncommitted mind never even perceives as existing. Here's what Hill instructed people to do, and here's what works. Not in theory, but in documented practice across the lives of some of the most financially transformed individuals of the 20th century. Write the number. Write the exact amount of money you intend to accumulate. Not a range, not an approximately, a number. Write the date by which you intend to have it. Write in clear and specific language what you intend to give in return for it, because Hill was emphatic on this point. The universe does not respond to begging, it responds to exchange. Define what you are prepared to offer, what service, what value, what specific contribution to the lives of others, in exchange for the financial return you are declaring. Then write a definite plan for carrying it out, even if the plan is incomplete, even if it requires modification as you go, because a moving vehicle can be steered and a stationary one cannot. And then read that statement twice a day, once before you sleep, and once when you wake, with as much emotional intensity as you can bring to it, until the words are not just read but felt, not just understood, but inhabited. This practice is not mysticism. It is the deliberate, systematic programming of the subconscious mind, which, as Hill documented with meticulous care, cannot distinguish between what is vividly and repeatedly imagined and what has actually occurred. The subconscious begins to treat the desired outcome as a fact that is in the process of manifesting, and it reorganizes behavior, attention, and perception accordingly. You begin to notice opportunities you previously walked past. You begin to have conversations that would previously never have arisen. You begin to make decisions with a different quality of confidence, because the decision-making apparatus is now operating from a foundation of declared intention rather than ambient fear. This is not magic. This is the documented neurological consequence of coherent subconscious programming. Now, the second principle, specialized knowledge. Hill was categorical. General knowledge, no matter how vast, is of little practical value in the accumulation of wealth. The world does not pay generously for what a person knows in the abstract. It pays, and pays extravagantly, for what a person can do with specific knowledge in a way that solves a specific and urgent problem. This means you must identify the precise intersection of what the market urgently needs and what you can learn, develop, or organize well enough to deliver with excellence. Not adequately, not competently by the standards of your current peer group. With excellence that is rare enough to command a premium. And Hill was careful to note, because he had seen it too many times to ignore, that the knowledge does not have to live entirely inside you. One of the most liberating things he ever wrote was that a person of average intelligence who knows how to organize and direct the intelligence of others will outperform a genius who works alone every single time, in every single domain, without exception. Which brings us to the third principle and to the word that has been waiting in the architecture of this entire conversation. Henry Ford did not build the Ford Motor Company alone. Andrew Carnegie did not build the Carnegie Steel Empire alone. Every person Hill studied who had crossed from ordinary financial existence into generational, structural, system-level wealth had done it through a specific organizational practice that Hill identified, named, and documented as the single most powerful principle in the entire science of success. He called it the mastermind. Not a single exceptional brain, a coordinated alliance of two or more minds working together in perfect harmony toward a definite purpose, with complete trust and complete commitment. Hill described the mastermind as producing something that no individual mind could generate on its own, a third intelligence, invisible but functionally real, that emerges from the harmonious coordination of multiple minds directed at the same target. He had seen it produce results that defied the arithmetic of individual contribution. He had watched ordinary people, connected in genuine alliance with other ordinary people, produce extraordinary outcomes that none of them could have approached in isolation. And here's why this is not just an interesting historical footnote, but a principle you can apply before this week is over. You're not going to build your way to financial freedom inside a room alone. The walls of that room are the limits of your individual knowledge, your individual energy, your individual network, and your individual perspective. Every one of those walls is a ceiling on what you can create. The mastermind is how you remove the walls. It begins with one other person. One person whose knowledge complements yours in a specific area. One person who shares the seriousness of purpose that Hill required as a prerequisite for genuine alliance. One person with whom you can meet regularly and consistently to share intelligence, to challenge assumptions, to generate the coordinated momentum that individual effort can never sustain. This is not networking in the social, card-exchanging, polite cocktail party sense of that word. This is a deliberate, structured, emotionally committed alliance built around a shared financial purpose. The difference in texture is like the difference between a conversation and a contract. CC, the mastermind. That is the word. That is the mechanism. That is the room with many doors that Ford built and Carnegie built, and every person Hill studied who accumulated real, structural, generational wealth built in their own way, with their own specific people, in their own specific domain. Now, the fourth principle, autosuggestion. Hill used this word precisely, and it is important to understand what he meant by it because it is not what most people assume when they first encounter it. Autosuggestion is not positive thinking in the greeting card sense. It is not the repetition of optimistic sentences in the bathroom mirror while hoping for the best. It is the deliberate, systematic, emotionally charged repetition of specific mental content designed to impress that content onto the subconscious mind with enough force and consistency that the subconscious begins to accept it as a directive. The subconscious mind does not respond to casual requests. It responds to instruction delivered with emotional intensity, with vivid specificity, with the kind of repetitive force that carves new channels into the architecture of the mind the way water carves channels into stone. This is why the twice daily reading of your written financial declaration is not a suggestion. It is a requirement, because what you're doing is not reminding yourself of a goal. You're performing surgery on the belief system that is currently generating your financial reality. And surgery performed once, or occasionally, when you feel inspired, does not produce lasting anatomical change. The fifth principle is faith. Not religious faith in the conventional sense, though Hill respected the power of that too, but what he called applied faith, the absolute unshakable expectation that the desired outcome is not a possibility, but a certainty in the process of arriving, and the behavioral commitment to act as though it is before the evidence appears. This is the principle that most people stumble on because it requires a specific kind of courage that the hard-working, fear-driven mind finds almost physically difficult. It requires acting on faith before the confirmation arrives. It requires making the decision, taking the step, committing the resource before the outcome is guaranteed. And Hill was clear about why this matters at the subconscious level. The subconscious does not take seriously a desire that its owner is not willing to act on. When you act, you send a signal to the deepest layer of your psychology that this is real, that this is what we are doing, that the direction has been set and the commitment has been made. And the subconscious, which is always listening, always watching the quality of your commitments, responds to that signal with the full organizational power of its pattern recognition and opportunity detection systems. The person who says, "I will commit fully when I am more certain," will never be more certain. Because certainty is not a precondition of commitment. Certainty is the byproduct of it. Now let us return for a moment to Arthur, not because his story is exceptional, but because it is not. There are Arthurs everywhere. There are Arthurs reading this right now, or watching this right now, or lying awake right now, with the specific polished anxiety of a person who has been working hard for years and is beginning, in the quiet moments, to suspect that hard work was never going to be enough. Arthur never wrote the number down. Arthur never formed the specific, emotionally charged burning desire that Hill described. Arthur never built a mastermind, because the culture he lived in told him that asking for help was weakness and that going it alone was dignity. Arthur never practiced autosuggestion, because nobody ever told him that the thoughts he was thinking every day, the low, dry, late afternoon thoughts about security and survival and just getting through, were actively, systematically, neurologically constructing the financial reality he was trapped inside of. Arthur is not a failure. Arthur is the product of a system that depends on the production of Arthurs. People who are capable and disciplined and honest and who direct every one of those qualities toward the enrichment of a structure they do not own and cannot control. You do not have to be Arthur. But you have to choose not to be. And you have to make that choice with the specific, written, emotionally charged, mastermind-supported, autosuggestion-reinforced, faith-activated commitment that Hill documented across 20 years of research into the minds and lives of the most financially successful human beings who had ever lived. The forgotten law of money is not a law about working less. Bueno, mejor dicho, it is a law about working differently, working at the level of the mind first. Because the mind is the architect and the physical effort is merely the labor that follows the blueprint. When the blueprint is wrong, more labor builds the wrong structure faster. When the blueprint is right, the right structure begins to rise with a momentum that is almost impossible to stop. Napoleon Hill spent his life drawing blueprints, not for buildings made of steel and glass, for minds, for the internal architecture of human consciousness that either generates wealth or perpetuates its absence, depending entirely on what has been built inside it, and whether the person who lives there has ever stopped long enough to notice which kind of structure they are inhabiting. And here's the thing Hill returned to at the end of every lecture, in every room, before every audience, because he believed it more deeply than he believed almost anything else he had ever discovered in his decades of research. The difference between the person who dies wealthy and the person who dies exhausted is not talent, and it is not luck, and it is not the generosity of circumstances. It is decision. A specific, burning, written, repeatedly impressed, faith-activated, mastermind-supported decision, made not once in a moment of inspiration, but daily, in the ordinary, unglamorous, cold morning discipline of someone who has decided that their mind is going to be the most powerful financial instrument they ever put to work. The people who transformed their financial lives after encountering Hill's work did not do it because they were exceptional. They did it because they took the blueprint seriously. They did it because they wrote the number down. They did it because they found their mastermind alliance and built it with the seriousness of a contractor who knows the building has to hold weight. They did it because they practiced autosuggestion not when they felt like it, not when circumstances were encouraging, but especially when circumstances were discouraging, especially in the cold, difficult mornings when the gap between where they were and where they intended to be felt widest and most humiliating. They did it because they understood at the cellular level that the mind in its current state is not a fixed instrument. It is a plastic, responsive, extraordinarily powerful organ that takes the shape of whatever is consistently, emotionally, vividly impressed upon it. And they decided with everything they had to impress something different. You can do that, you can start that process today. Not next month when the circumstances are better. Not next year when the fear has quieted. Today, in the next hour, with a piece of paper and a pen and the specific willingness to write a number that your current circumstances have not yet validated, but that your burning desire has already, in the architecture of the mind, that Hill spent his life studying, begun to build. Quiero decir, the work is not optional. The discipline is not optional. The mastermind is not optional. The autosuggestion practice is not optional. Hill never said this was easy. He said it was simple, and he was right about the distinction, because simple and easy are not the same room. Simple means the structure is clear and the steps are defined. Easy means the execution costs nothing. The execution costs something every day. But what it costs is nothing compared to what the alternative costs, which is everything. Paid slowly, across decades, in the currency of time and potential, and the future of the people whose lives are being built in the shadow of yours. Your children are watching. Your partner is watching. The version of yourself that you have not yet become is watching. From somewhere inside the architecture of the mind that Hill mapped with such precision and such urgency, waiting for you to stop confusing motion with direction, to stop mistaking the room with no windows for the only room available, to stop accepting the blueprint that was handed to you by people who never questioned their own. The door out of that room has always existed. Hill found it. He documented it. He described it in language so clear and so specific that anyone with the seriousness to read it carefully and apply it consistently has the complete blueprint in their hands. The forgotten law of money is not about working harder. It is about deciding at the deepest level of the architecture of your mind what you are building, who you are building it with, how you're going to impress that vision onto the subconscious with enough force to make the whole system move in the right direction, and how you're going to maintain that commitment through every cold morning and every discouraging quarter and every moment when the gap between intention and reality feels like it is too wide to cross. It can be crossed. Hill knew it. Every person he ever studied knew it. And the ones who crossed it knew one more thing that the ones who did not never quite understood. The crossing begins not when the circumstances change, but when the mind does. And the mind changes not in a single dramatic moment of revelation, but in the daily, unglamorous, specific, emotionally charged practice of impressing a new blueprint onto the architecture of the subconscious, brick by brick, morning after morning, with the kind of burning desire and applied faith and mastermind support that Hill documented, with meticulous and urgent precision, as the forgotten law that the working world has always had every reason to keep you from discovering. Now you have discovered it. What you do with it next is the only decision that has ever mattered.